While the 1961 Impala is my all-time favorite version of this fantastic nameplate, the 1959 release was stunningly beautiful from every angle. When people first saw the 1959 Impala, it looked like a car that was designed more for dreams than for streets. Its wings stretched wide, its tail fins stood proudly, and its body seemed to float along the pavement with a presence that made even those who weren't car enthusiasts turn their heads in admiration. That year was a celebration of excess in design, with bold styling cues that made the Impala a rolling sculpture rather than just a mode of transportation. Collectors often point out that this wow factor is the reason people like a 59 Impala more than its predecessor, even though both were part of the same generation. The 1960 release, though still a beautiful car in its own right, lost a little of that magic sparkle, that je ne sais quoi, that made the 59 feel so special. It's not to say the 1960 was unloved, far from it, but compared to the audaciousness of the 1959 Impala, it felt more restrained and some would argue safer. Yet, even a restrained full-size Chevrolet of the early 1960s still stood head and shoulders above much of the competition in terms of presence, quality, and design. Not everybody in that era, however, could step up to the Impala. Chevrolet understood that it needed to cover the entire market if it wanted to dominate the full-size category. This was the thinking behind the introduction of the Biscayne. Where the Impala was about flair, trim, and the aura of prestige, the Biscayne was aimed squarely at the budget-conscious buyer. It was Chevrolet's way of saying, "We've got something for everyone." The Biscayne was the most affordable full-size Chevy one could buy new, but affordability didn't mean compromise in a way that stripped the soul out of the car. Instead, the Biscayne carried much of the same DNA that made the Impala appealing. It shared the same general body structure, it carried familiar design language, and it had access to many of the same engines, though in a simpler trim. Buyers who couldn't stretch their budget to the flash of an Impala could still park a brand new full-size Chevrolet in their driveway, and that was powerful. It was a democratization of style and engineering at a time when cars were central to American life. The 1960 Biscayne featured in these photos represents more than just a car. It embodies the philosophy that everyone deserved to have access to the freedom and prestige associated with Chevrolet ownership. This particular example is even more fascinating because it's a former museum piece. According to eBay seller McIntyre7144, the car spent numerous years on display, quietly admired by visitors who walked past it without ever turning the key in the ignition. Museums preserve vehicles like this because they aren't just metal and chrome. They are artifacts of a culture, snapshots of an era when the open road meant possibility. Though the seller doesn't provide further specifics about the museum, the condition of the Biscayne speaks volumes. For a car to have sat under the careful protection of curators and caretakers means it avoided the fate of countless others from the same generation: rust, rot, neglect, and the slow decay of time. Remarkably, this Biscayne still wears its original metal, unscarred by the cancer of corrosion that so often plagues vehicles of this age. The undersides are clean, free from the bubbling or soft spots that usually signal trouble. Of course, any experienced collector or restorer will tell you that a car like this should always be lifted, inspected, and prodded for peace of mind. That's part of the ritual of buying a classic. It's not just about falling in love with the shape and story, but also verifying that the bones are strong enough to carry it into the future. Yet, at first glance, this Biscayne passes the test with flying colors. The preservation goes deeper. The paint on the body is original, a survivor's finish that whispers stories of highways long gone, of neon-lit gas stations and drive-ins where cars like this ruled the night. Original paint tells you this car was cared for. It was never stripped, resprayed, or subjected to the questionable repair jobs that often plague cheaper cars when they pass through multiple owners with limited means. Equally impressive is the interior, untouched since day one. Slide inside, and you are not entering a restored vision of the past. You are entering the past itself. The seats, the dash, the trim, all of it remains as Chevrolet intended back in 1960. Time capsules like this are rare because interiors are often the first victims of wear and tear. Sunlight, spills, careless owners, all contribute to the deterioration of fabric and vinyl. Yet here, the interior is a museum in its own right, preserved not behind ropes or glass, but in the car itself. Of course, certain consumables had to be replaced for practicality. New tires have been fitted, along with brakes, a fuel tank, and a new exhaust system. These updates are not only expected, they are essential. They ensure that this isn't a static display piece, but a functioning automobile that can be driven and enjoyed. For the purist, these minor intrusions into originality are acceptable because they fall under the category of maintenance rather than modification. They don't rob the car of its authenticity, they simply ensure its survival. Pop the hood, and you'll find a 235 cubic inch straight-six engine, the base power plant for 1960 full-size Chevrolets. It's paired with a 3-speed manual transmission, a setup that speaks to the Biscayne's working-class mission. This isn't the fire-breathing V8 of an Impala SS, nor the rumbling heartbeat of a boulevard cruiser built to impress. Instead, it's a humble, reliable, honest engine designed to get you where you need to go with steady confidence. Starts, it runs, and it drives perfectly. The seller doesn't know if it's ever been rebuilt, which adds a layer of mystery to its story. But the odometer tells a tale. Just 37,000 miles, claimed to be original. For a 65-year-old car, that's astonishingly low. It suggests a life of gentle use, perhaps a single owner who drove sparingly, or a family that kept it garaged and brought it out only on special occasions. From a collector's standpoint, the 1960 model year doesn't carry the same desirability as the flamboyant 1959 or the sleek 1961. Enthusiasts often gravitate to those cars because they mark visual peaks in Chevrolet's design language. The Biscayne, meanwhile, was never meant to be a showstopper. It was a practical purchase. Yet, therein lies the beauty of this example. Because it isn't an Impala, because it isn't the crown jewel of the lineup, it has survived in a way that feels more authentic. It's not a car that was restored to fetch six figures at auction. It's a car that lived quietly, preserved by circumstance rather than obsession. That makes it approachable. You don't need to be a millionaire to own it. In fact, the seller is asking just $22,900, a fraction of what a comparable Impala would command in this condition. For enthusiasts who want to experience the golden era of Chevrolet design without mortgaging their home, this is a rare opportunity. The eBay listing includes a make offer option, a small but meaningful gesture. It reflects the reality of the classic car market today, where value is often in the eye of the beholder. Maybe $22,900 feels right to someone who appreciates originality and low miles. Maybe someone else will argue that because it's a Biscayne, not an Impala, it should sell for less. That dance of price and perception has always been part of the collector car world. Regardless, it's hard to deny the appeal of this particular car. Its originality, its history as a museum piece, and its preserved condition make it special. Located in Lanesville, Indiana, the Biscayne sits quietly, waiting for its next chapter. The seller suggests trailering it home, and that's wise advice. Adding unnecessary miles to a 37,000-mile survivor feels almost sacrilegious. Better to keep those digits low, to preserve the magic of knowing you're sitting in a car that has barely been touched by the passage of decades. Beyond the practical details, what makes this Biscayne truly shine is what it represents. It is a reminder of an era when cars were more than just machines. They were family members, companions on road trips, silent witnesses to first dates, and loyal servants in the day-to-day grind. The Biscayne was never about flash. It was about function, dependability, and affordability. Yet here we are, decades later, admiring it in the same way we admire its more glamorous sibling, the Impala. Time has a way of elevating even the humble. What was once just transportation becomes, in hindsight, a treasure. For today's enthusiast, stepping into a car like this is like stepping into a time machine. The smell of aged vinyl, the sound of the door closing with that unmistakable metallic thunk, the view over the long hood framed by thin A-pillars. All of it transports you to 1960. You imagine pulling up to a diner, watching kids in poodle skirts and leather jackets laugh under neon lights, or driving along Route 66 when it was still America's main street. This is the kind of car that makes history tangible, that connects generations through steel, glass, and chrome. And so, while the 1960 Biscayne may never be the headline act of a concours event, it has something far more valuable, authenticity. It tells its story quietly, without embellishment, without restoration gloss. It is what it always was, and in today's world of over-restored classics, that honesty is rare. For $22,900, someone will not just be buying a car. They'll be buying a piece of American history, preserved in metal, paint, and memory. They'll be buying a chance to experience what Chevrolet meant to ordinary families in 1960. They'll be buying more than a Biscayne, they'll be buying a bridge to the past. When you think about the American automobile market of 1960, it was an era defined not just by styling but also by the cultural competition happening across brands. Chevrolet was locked in a never-ending rivalry with Ford, while Plymouth and Dodge nipped at their heels, each trying to carve out their share of the middle-class dream. Chevrolet's strategy with the Biscayne was clever because it provided a direct answer to the Ford Custom and Plymouth Savoy. Both of those cars were also positioned as affordable full-size models, stripped down compared to their flashier siblings like the Galaxy or the Fury. Yet the Chevrolet Biscayne managed to capture something a little different. Where the competition sometimes looked utilitarian or uninspired, Chevrolet gave the Biscayne just enough elegance and refinement to make it feel like a real Chevrolet rather than a budget compromise. Buyers could tell they weren't settling for less. They were simply choosing a simpler version of the same greatness. At its heart, the Biscayne was a car meant for the working man. It was the vehicle you bought if you wanted to drive to the factory every morning, pick up your kids from school, or take your family on a weekend trip without breaking the bank. The affordability didn't make it feel like a lesser car. Instead, Chevrolet built it with pride, ensuring that even the entry-level model carried the same engineering strength as the rest of the lineup. And that's part of why examples like this museum-preserved 1960 survive today. They were built well enough that, when cared for properly, they could withstand the decades and emerge as time capsules of a simpler age. The 235 Ci Straight 6 under the hood is often overlooked in conversations about classic Chevrolets, overshadowed by the mighty small block and big block V8s that would dominate headlines in the years to come. But in truth, the Straight 6 deserves respect. It was a sturdy, reliable engine that powered countless Chevrolets through the 1950s and into the 1960s. With its cast-iron block, 7 main bearings, and reputation for simplicity, it was the kind of motor you could depend on to start on cold mornings, run smoothly with minimal fuss, and last for years with basic maintenance. For many families, that mattered more than horsepower figures. The Straight 6 meant security, dependability, and peace of mind. Pairing it with the 3-speed manual transmission kept the experience honest. It wasn't about speed or flair. It was about the joy of driving something straightforward and mechanical, something that responded directly to your hands and feet without the filter of modern electronics. Imagine the first owner of this Biscayne back in 1960. Perhaps he was a young father, newly married, with kids on the way. Maybe he worked at a factory in Indiana or managed a small-town business, proud to bring home his first new car. Walking into the Chevrolet dealership, he would have seen the glistening Impalas under the showroom lights, tempting him with chrome and two-tone paint. But practicality guided his decision. The salesman showed him the Biscayne, explained its lower price, reassured him that it carried the same bones as the Impala, and likely closed the deal with a handshake. Driving that car home would have been a moment of pride, even if it wasn't the most glamorous model. It was his car, his Chevy, his key to the American dream. This is what makes survivor cars so fascinating today. They are not just machines. They are vessels of memory. Each mile on that odometer represents a moment in someone's life, commutes, vacations, first dates, family milestones. With only 37,000 miles on the clock, this Biscayne didn't see the wear and tear of endless commutes or cross-country adventures. Instead, it lived gently, perhaps driven only on Sundays, perhaps parked in a garage for long stretches while other cars took the brunt of daily driving. Its preservation is a kind of quiet miracle, a testament to the respect shown by its owners. Collectors often debate the value of originality versus restoration. Some want their cars restored to showroom perfection, polished and gleaming beyond what they ever were when new. Others, however, argue that nothing compares to original paint, original interiors, and untouched metal. Those imperfections, the small nicks, the patina, the way the materials have aged, tell a story that no restoration can replicate. This Biscayne falls firmly into that second category. Its originality is its strength. It may not dazzle with flawless paint or gleaming chrome, but what it offers instead is honesty. You are looking at a car that has survived exactly as it was built, and in today's market, that authenticity is becoming increasingly rare. The pricing at $22,900 reflects that balance between collectability and accessibility. If this were an Impala with the same mileage and originality, the asking price would be several times higher. But because it's a Biscayne, the market views it as less desirable. Yet for many enthusiasts, that's the very reason it's desirable. It's affordable enough to be attainable, but rare enough in this condition to be special. For under $25,000, you could own not just a classic car but a rolling piece of Chevrolet history. And unlike some high-dollar classics that become too precious to drive, this Biscayne invites you to get behind the wheel, to feel the thin-rimmed steering wheel in your hands, to hear the hum of the straight six as you row through the gears. Think about taking it out on a quiet Sunday morning, cruising down back roads lined with cornfields, the windows down, the bench seat wide enough for you and your partner to sit shoulder to shoulder. The ride would be smooth, the suspension soft, the pace unhurried. In a world that moves faster every day, cars like this remind us to slow down, to savor the journey rather than rush to the destination. The Biscayne was never about going fast. It was about going together, and that sentiment feels more valuable today than ever before. Of course, the Biscayne also carries with it the cultural weight of its time. In 1960, America was on the cusp of major changes. The optimism of the post-war boom was still strong. Highways were expanding, suburbs were growing, and cars were central to that story. A car wasn't just a way to get around. It was a status symbol, a family room on wheels, a passport to freedom. Chevrolet understood that and tailored its lineup accordingly. The Impala was for those who wanted to show off. The Bel Air was for those who wanted a balance of style and practicality. And the Biscayne was for those who simply wanted to be part of the Chevrolet family without overspending. Each played its role in a finely tuned marketing machine, and together they helped Chevrolet dominate the decade. Fast forward to today, and the Biscayne stands as a reminder of that strategy. It may not have the flash of an Impala, but it has character, and in the collector world, character goes a long way. When you show up at a cars and coffee event in a Biscayne, people will stop and look. Not because it's the rarest or most valuable car there, but because it's unusual. It sparks conversations. Someone will say, "My grandfather had one of these," or, "I remember riding in the back of a Biscayne when I was a kid." That connection is priceless. It turns a car into a story, and stories are what keep the classic car hobby alive. Even the location of this Biscayne adds to its charm. Sitting in Lanesville, Indiana, a small town with a population of just a few thousand, it feels appropriate that such a humble car would be found in such a humble place. It's not sitting in a high-end showroom in California or a private collection in Florida. It's sitting quietly in the Midwest, waiting for someone to recognize its worth and give it a new home. There's something poetic about that, something that ties the car back to its roots as a working-class machine. The advice to trailer it home is sound. Adding unnecessary miles to such a low-mileage car would detract from its uniqueness. But once it's safely in your garage, the choice becomes yours. Do you preserve it exactly as it is, a museum piece that continues to sit quietly, admired but rarely driven? Or do you take it out occasionally, letting it stretch its legs on sunny afternoons, sharing its story with those who see it on the road? Either path has merit. Either path honors the car. The beauty of classics like this is that ownership isn't just about possession. It's about stewardship. You don't truly own a car like this. You care for it, preserve it, and eventually pass it on, hopefully in the same or better condition than you received it. And that is perhaps the greatest value of all. This Biscayne is not just an object. It's a legacy. A legacy of Chevrolet's commitment to offering a car for every customer. A legacy of a family that cared for it enough to keep it intact. A legacy of American design, engineering, and culture. For the next owner, it will become part of their story too. A connection to the past that enriches the present. That's what makes cars like this so captivating. They remind us that history isn't something you read about in books. It's something you can touch, sit in, and drive.